Glenn Landsberg has lived in outback Australia all his life. He's a second-generation landholder who's trialling different rehydration techniques in a bid to turn a dry landscape into arable farming land, and it's worked.
It becomes a very much a boom-bust management cycle, and it's very fragile. But a lot of these plants that are here, they evolved to thrive in this landscape. One of our most limiting factors is water, so trying to make the most of the rainfall that we do get.
This region near Charleville in Western Queensland is typically some of the most arid land in Australia, despite the current rainfall. Climate change is compounding the problem, creating hotter and drier conditions.
We're already seeing this degradation across vast landscapes across Australia, but climate change is interacting with these things. We're starting to see these long summers and these dry summers interacting with a lot of agricultural activity, which is causing more degradation and more desertification right across the continent.
But some of the most volatile ecosystems are defying the situation and going green, despite the increasing aridity. Studies show a 50% rise in carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere are fast-tracking photosynthesis in plants by allowing them to use scarce water more efficiently.
For the plants that are living there right now, they're able to grow easier and faster. So for them, it's probably a good thing. On the other hand, it means that we'll probably see over the longer term some changes in the ecosystem composition.
Additional carbon dioxide may be beneficial for plant growth, but the negative impacts of hotter, drier climates have not gone away. The greening process due to more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is happening on drylands globally, but it's not happening in all arid regions. And scientists warn there are downsides to the greening of natural ecosystems, with more vegetation increasing the risk of bushfires. That warning is not lost on Glenn Landsberg.
We can do all sorts of restoration work, but if we don't take into account what's gone wrong to start with, and if we don't change those practices, then we're going to be stuck in that loop. It's just going to keep happening.
For now, he's soaking up the early summer rainfall. Sarah Clarke, Al Jazeera, Brisbane.
OK, Nick Clarke is joining us now from Riyadh to tell us more about what's on the agenda there, Nick.
Thanks, Darren. Yes, welcome to Riyadh here in the heart of the Arabian Desert, hosting this conference on desertification. Arabian nations, of course, know only too well the challenges of keeping the sands at bay, but it is not down to them alone, of course. It's a problem around the world. Just take a look at what's happening in the United States this year alone. Nearly half of US states facing forms of drought in some shape or form. In southern Africa, Lesotho, Malawi, Namibia, Zambia, Zimbabwe all declared a state of national disaster as drought destroyed livestock and livelihoods. 27 million people affected by that. Think of southern Europe, some of the worst droughts. We saw in Spain, didn't we? Those incredible images of old ancient villages at the foot of dried up reservoirs and so forth. Everywhere, dry lands in danger of turning to desert. What are the causes? Principal causes, climate change, of course, but also the incorrect use of land, from overgrazing, which damages fragile soil systems, to deforestation, to over-extraction of water, to overuse of fertilizer, all these sort of things. Let's take this on. We can speak, I'm pleased to, with Baron Joseph Orr, who's the Chief Scientist at the UN Convention for Combating Desertification. Welcome, Mr. Orr. First up, tell us more about what desertification is and precisely why we should be worried about it.
So you mentioned that this is a problem everywhere, and it's even in areas that are not dry. We call it land degradation. It means the loss of productivity of land. And when that happens in dry lands, it's desertification, meaning water is limited, and if we degrade that land, it's much more at risk, and that's why that focus is there.
And it's getting worse as time goes on, right? What kind of impact does it have on people's livelihoods?
Well, it's an across-the-board impact. I mean, if we take, for example, the Sahel in northern Africa, in the northern part of Africa, we're having a situation where people who used to be neighbors, herders on one side, farmers on the other, are now in conflict because in between, the land is degraded and they are pushed now into each other's space. So it's an issue that is also, as you mentioned, affects developed countries. So we call it soil sealing, where we actually are converting land for settlement, for farming, and we're losing those natural ecosystem services.
if there's, I mean, clearly climate change is reducing the amount of rainfall in some parts. And if there is no rain, how do you fight against desertification?
Well, think of it this way. We can't really control the rainfall, but we certainly can control what happens after it rains. Water scarcity is tied to human decisions, what we do with the water, and most importantly, what we do with the land. Think of it this way. If we plant thirsty crops, we're more at risk. If we allow our soils to degrade, then their water holding capacity goes down. We need more water to use the same soils.
We've seen two very recent climate conference and also the biodiversity conference in Colombia. Neither were particularly successful, no consensus in Colombia. And the climate COP in Baku was perceived as being pretty weak in its outcome. So what do we need to happen here?
Well, one way to think about it is both of those are tied to land. If we're going to put carbon in the right place instead of the atmosphere, it's going to be in our soils and in our vegetation. If we're going to protect biodiversity, it means stopping land conversion on one side and the loss of productivity of land we've already converted. So we kind of provide the ground floor. And this is a place where maybe we can move from narrowly attacking the problem to holistically attacking it and basically keeping this ship underneath us afloat.
Baron Joseph Orr, great to get your analysis. Appreciate that very much. That's Baron Orr, Chief Scientist at the UN Convention for Combating Desertification. You know, I mentioned Baku just then, the climate conference that took place. We saw it firsthand there, the beginnings of desertification, with the Caspian Sea receding as much as 20 meters in 10 years. And there are fears that a similar thing could happen as that which happened at the Aral Sea, which has all but disappeared now and is just basically a dusty, salty plain where nothing can live or survive.
Okay, thank you so much. Nick Clarke, our environment editor, reporting from Riyadh. Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.